This is all you got us. My mom sneered, holding the watch I saved 3 months for. Your brother pays the utilities, groceries, and Dad's barber visits. I smiled and responded, yeah, because I set it all to auto-pay from my account. Minutes later, my brother slid a note across the table. We've agreed you should move out. That night, I canceled every payment, froze the joint card, and sent one document to the landlord. By morning, they woke up to an eviction warning with my name nowhere on it. I, 24M, thought I had the perfect family dynamic figured out. My older brother was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was the reliable one who kept everything running smoothly in the background. What I didn't realize was just how smoothly I had been making things run until the night everything fell apart. It started on a Tuesday evening in October. I had been saving for 3 months, skipping lunches and walking to work instead of taking the bus, all to buy my parents matching watches for their anniversary. Nothing too fancy, but decent quality timepieces that would last. I was proud of the sacrifice I had made, excited to see their faces when they opened the gift. My brother had shown up that afternoon with his usual fanfare, carrying bags of takeout from their favorite restaurant. He always knew how to make an entrance, and my parents always ate it up. We gathered around the dining table, the familiar scene of family dinner playing out like it had countless times before. I waited until after we finished eating to present my gift. My hands shook slightly as I placed the small wrapped box in front of them. My mother picked it up, examining it with the kind of scrutiny she usually reserved for examining receipts. When she opened it and saw the watches, her expression didn't change to the gratitude I had expected. Instead, she held up one of the watches and asked me if this was all I had gotten them. The disappointment in her voice cut through me like a knife. She went on to explain how my brother had been paying for the utilities, groceries, and even Dad's monthly barber visits. Her tone suggested that my gift was somehow inadequate in comparison. My father nodded along, adding that my brother had really been stepping up lately. The implication was clear: I wasn't pulling my weight. I felt my chest tighten as the familiar pattern played out. My brother basked in their praise while I sat there feeling like I had somehow failed again. But then something shifted inside me. Instead of shrinking back like I usually did, I found myself smiling. I told them they were absolutely right about my brother paying for everything. In fact, I explained, he had been doing such a good job that I had decided to help him out by setting up autopay for all those expenses from my account months ago. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand froze halfway to putting the watch back in the box. My father stopped mid-nod, his mouth slightly open. My brother, who had been leaning back in his chair with that satisfied expression he always wore during these moments, straightened up like someone had just poured ice water down his back. My mother recovered first, asking me what I meant by that. I explained calmly that every utility bill, every grocery expense, every one of Dad's barber appointments had been automatically charged to my checking account for the past 4 months. My brother hadn't paid for anything. He had just been taking credit for my money. My brother's face went through several shades of red before he started protesting that he had no idea about the arrangement. He claimed he thought the bills were being split somehow, that there had been some kind of misunderstanding. But I could see in his eyes that he knew exactly what had been happening. He had been checking his account every month, seeing that the money hadn't been taken out, and choosing to let everyone believe he was the family hero. My father asked why I hadn't said anything before. I told them I hadn't minded helping out, especially since I made decent money at my job and they were family. What I minded was being made to feel like I wasn't contributing when I had been covering nearly everything. The atmosphere at the table had shifted completely. My parents kept looking between my brother and me, trying to process this information. My brother was fidgeting with his napkin, no longer the confident favorite son he had been just minutes before. That's when my brother pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. After a few minutes, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table to me. I opened it and read the brief message inside. He had written that they had all discussed it and agreed that I should move out. The note was signed by him, but he mentioned that our parents were in agreement. I looked up at my parents, and neither of them contradicted him. My mother looked uncomfortable, but didn't speak up. My father just stared at his hands. The message was clear. Even after learning the truth about who had been financially supporting the household, they still wanted me gone. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. I told them that I understood their decision and would start making arrangements. My voice was steady, but inside I felt something fundamental break. This wasn't just about money or credit anymore. This was about the fact that even when faced with the truth, they chose my brother over me. I excused myself from the table and went upstairs to my room. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my laptop and logged into my banking account. Every autopay I had set up over the months was listed there in neat rows. Electric bill, gas bill, water, internet, cable, the monthly grocery store charge I had arranged with the manager, even the standing appointment at Dad's barber shop. One by one, I canceled each automatic payment. Each click felt like cutting a cord that had been binding me to this house, to this family dynamic that had never really valued what I brought to the table. With each cancellation, I felt lighter and more resolved. Next, I called the credit card company and froze the joint account card that my brother had been using for his grand gestures. The representative asked if I wanted to remove myself from the account entirely, and I told her I would call back about that. But the most important call came last. I contacted our landlord and asked for copies of all the lease documents. What I discovered during that conversation changed everything. When we had moved into this house 3 years ago, only my name had been put on the lease. My parents had said it would be easier for credit purposes, and I hadn't thought much about it at the time. I had been so focused on being part of the family unit that I hadn't realized I was actually the only legal tenant. Everyone else in the house was essentially living there because I allowed them to. The landlord confirmed that any lease violations or eviction proceedings would be in my name alone, but also that I had the sole legal right to the property. I requested that the landlord send an official notice to the house the next morning informing all residents that the lease would not be renewed and that they had 30 days to vacate. I also asked that the notice make it clear that I, as the leaseholder, would be the only one authorized to make any arrangements regarding the property going forward. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house around me. My brother was on the phone in his room, probably trying to figure out how he was going to pay for things now. My parents were having a quiet conversation in their room that I couldn't make out the words to, but the tone sounded worried. I had spent so many nights in this same bed feeling like I didn't quite fit in with my own family. Tonight was different. I felt clear-headed and purposeful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m. I opened the door to find a courier with an official envelope marked for the attention of all residents. My mother came downstairs as I was signing for the delivery. She asked who was at the door, and I told her it was just some paperwork that needed to be delivered. She didn't press for details, probably still processing everything that had happened the night before. I handed her the envelope and went back to my coffee. I could hear her opening it in the living room, followed by the sound of papers rustling. Then there was silence for a long moment before she called for my father and brother to come downstairs immediately. The next few minutes were chaos. My mother was reading the eviction notice out loud, her voice getting higher with each sentence. My father kept asking what this meant and whether it was some kind of mistake. My brother was demanding to know how this could happen when he had been paying all the bills. That's when my mother remembered our conversation from the night before. She came into the kitchen holding the notice and asked me if this had something to do with the auto-pay situation I had mentioned. I confirmed that it did, explaining that when I canceled all the payments, I had also decided it was time for everyone to find their own living arrangements. My brother accused me of being vindictive and acting out of spite. I told him I was simply responding to his note about moving out. If they all agreed I should leave, then I was leaving. The house would be empty for the next tenant, and everyone could find places that better suited their needs. My father asked if I was really going to kick out my own family. I reminded him that they had decided I should move out first. I was just making sure everyone got a fresh start instead of leaving them to figure out how to cover the expenses I had been handling. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. Without my auto-pay covering everything, the bills would start bouncing within days. The joint credit card was frozen, so my brother couldn't make his usual grand gestures. And now they had 30 days to find new places to live. My mother asked if we could work something out, maybe sit down and discuss things rationally. I told her I thought that was a great idea, but it seemed like the time for that conversation had been the night before the note got passed across the table. Over the next few days, the house became a different place entirely. My brother spent most of his time on his phone, trying to find an apartment he could actually afford on his real income. My parents were going through their finances with a calculator, trying to figure out how they had been living beyond their means without realizing it. The utility companies started calling when the autopay didn't go through. My mother answered most of these calls, and I could hear her explaining that there had been some kind of banking error and they were working to resolve it. Each conversation ended with her promising to call them back with new payment information. My brother tried a different approach. He cornered me one evening and suggested that maybe we had both been too hasty. He said he was willing to admit that he should have been more aware of the financial arrangements, and perhaps I had overreacted to their suggestion about moving out. I told him I appreciated his perspective, but that I had already made arrangements to move into my own apartment. I had found a nice one-bedroom place closer to my work, and I was looking forward to the change. The lease on this house would expire, and everyone would need to figure out their next steps. He asked if I was really going to let our parents end up homeless just to prove a point. I reminded him that they had plenty of time to find a place, and that between the three of them, they should be able to manage their expenses if they planned carefully. 2 weeks into the 30-day notice period, my parents asked if they could speak with me privately. They sat me down at the same dining room table where this had all started and admitted that they had made a mistake. They said they hadn't realized how much I had been contributing, both financially and in other ways, and they were sorry for how they had treated me. My mother explained that they had gotten used to my brother's dramatic gestures and flashy contributions, and they had started taking my quieter, more consistent support for granted. She said they realized now that my approach had actually been more valuable because it kept the household running smoothly. My father added that the note about moving out had been my brother's idea, and they had gone along with it because they thought I might benefit from having my own place. They hadn't meant it as a punishment or a rejection. I listened to their apology and told them I believed they were sincere. But I also explained that the situation had opened my eyes to some patterns in our family dynamic that had been bothering me for a long time. Moving out wasn't just about the immediate conflict. It was about me learning to value myself the way I wanted others to value me. They asked if there was any way I would consider staying, maybe with some new ground rules about communication and mutual respect. I told them I had already signed the lease on my new apartment and paid the deposits. My decision wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about growth. Update 1. 3 weeks after the eviction notice was delivered, I moved out to my new apartment. It was strange packing up my belongings from the room I had lived in for years, but it felt more liberating than sad. My parents found a smaller apartment across town that they could afford on their combined income. My father had to go back to work part-time to make the numbers work, but he said it was good to feel useful again. My mother took over managing their household budget and seemed to take pride in finding ways to stretch their money. My brother had the hardest transition. He ended up having to move in with a friend temporarily while he saved enough money for deposits and first month's rent on his own place. Without the ability to make grand gestures on someone else's dime, he had to confront what his actual financial situation looked like. The most surprising development came about a month after we all moved out. My brother called me and asked if we could meet for coffee. He wanted to apologize, not just for the note or for taking credit for my payments, but for years of behavior that he was starting to recognize as problematic. He explained that he had always felt pressure to be the successful, impressive son, and somewhere along the way he had started caring more about the appearance of success than actual accomplishment. When he realized I had been covering his supposed contributions, he panicked and lashed out instead of taking responsibility. I appreciated his honesty, and we started rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. It was slow going, but it felt more genuine than our interactions had in years. Update 2. 6 months later, our family dynamics had settled into a new normal. We met for dinner once a month, usually at a restaurant where everyone paid for their own meals. The conversations were different, less performative, more real. My parents had adjusted well to their new living situation. My mother had taken a part-time job that she actually enjoyed, and my father was doing some consulting work in his old field. They seemed happier and more energetic than they had in years. My brother had found his own apartment and was dating someone who challenged him to be more authentic. He still had his moments of wanting to impress people, but he was working on it. As for me, I loved living alone. My apartment was exactly what I wanted it to be, and I was saving money without having to secretly support 3 other adults. I had started taking some classes in the evenings and was considering a career change that I had been putting off for years. The watches I had given my parents for their anniversary were sitting on their nightstand when I visited them recently. My mother mentioned that she wore hers every day and that it reminded her of the conversation that changed everything for our family. Update 3. A year after everything happened, I got an unexpected text from my brother asking if I wanted to help him pick out a gift for our parents' next anniversary. He had saved up for months and wanted to make sure he chose something meaningful that he could actually afford. We spent an afternoon shopping together, and he ended up choosing a photo album filled with pictures of family memories from over the years. It was thoughtful and personal, and it didn't cost more than his budget allowed. When he gave it to our parents, the genuine joy on their faces was completely different from the forced appreciation I remembered from so many past occasions. They spent the whole evening looking through it together, sharing stories about the moments captured in each photo. That evening, as I was getting ready to leave their apartment, my father pulled me aside. He told me that the year apart had been hard on everyone, but that it had also been necessary. He said he was proud of the way I had handled the situation and the boundaries I had set. He admitted that they had all taken me for granted, and that my dramatic exit had forced them to confront some uncomfortable truths about how the family operated. The changes hadn't been easy, but they had made everyone stronger and more honest. My mother hugged me goodbye and whispered that she was grateful I had been brave enough to disrupt a system that wasn't working for anyone, even if it hadn't felt like it at the time. Looking back now, I realized that the night I canceled all those payments wasn't really about revenge. It was about finally valuing myself enough to demand the respect I deserved. The eviction notice wasn't meant to hurt my family. It was meant to wake everyone up to reality. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable patterns that aren't healthy for anyone involved. My family needed to learn how to function without taking advantage of my quiet generosity, and I needed to learn that my worth wasn't tied to how much I could give without recognition. The watches are still ticking, marking time for parents who learn to appreciate consistent love over flashy gestures. My brother learned that authentic relationships require genuine contribution, not just impressive appearances. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to walk away from everything to find out what's really worth keeping. We're all in a better place now, literally and figuratively. The family drama that started with a note slid across a table ended up teaching us all how to be honest about what we needed from each other. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to grow, even if it doesn't come wrapped in a pretty box.